Hello. This is the video called Good Questioning, and it will be about how to write questions that are good for research-based interviews. Let's start by writing a question. If you can meet anyone, dead or alive, and ask them one question, who would you interview and what would you ask them? Take a moment to think of this and write down the question you come up with, because we're going to be using it for the rest of the video. So let's see how good the question you came up with is. Unlike a journalistic interview where they collect quotes to kind of write this narrative or story, a research interview, their goal is to collect data that can be analyzed, data that has like meat and depth to it so they can break it down, compare it to other things, and come to a conclusion about it. You know you don't have this. You know you have a bad question if your response is simple, boring, or obvious. Something like, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream? Vanilla. It's like, who cares that you like vanilla? Or if you're asking like Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, you just wasted your one question with him to ask him about ice cream? Not good. So to help us write better questions, there are three kind of values, or the 3 C's that the textbook talks about. They are the 3 C's of a good question. The first is a question should be challenging. It's something that should require research and thinking that adds to a topic's discussion. So when you ask about someone's favorite ice cream, you're not really asking them to critically think. You're not asking or relating it back to like a field or a problem or something bigger than itself. It just kind of sticks in this little forgettable factoid. It's not important. So a better question would be asking like, why do you like this ice cream? Or like a so what kind of question. The second thing is your question should be compelling, which means it should have a real impact and purpose on people. The result of it should be applied and used for something. So asking someone about their ice cream flavor preferences doesn't really matter in the world. Like, it just is what it is. A better question might be asking about interest and preferences for milk alternative ice creams, because then you can use those responses to develop a new business or a new approach to ice cream. So I hope you see the difference, that one is just interesting and one is actually applicable to a bigger issue. Last C is for controversial. This isn't limited to questions that are taboo or shocker, like, do you agree with abortion? Do you agree with Donald Trump? Instead, controversial just means it's a question that isn't easy to answer and causes some sort of tension. So what it means is it's hard to pinpoint one answer as right because people are unique, but it will be difficult to answer. So with that favorite flavor of ice cream, you'll get a lot of answers and it's not easy to pinpoint what is right, but there's no tension about it. It's not like a debatable topic. So a better question might be about like, do you agree with banning ice cream in schools to promote healthier eating? Then you might get some debate and worthwhile responses. So think back to the question you came up for the prompt before when you're asking someone that one question. Was that one question able to meet the 3 C's? Was it challenging, compelling, and controversial? If not, try and tweak it and see what you can add or change about it. Another tool we should focus on is the actual structure and language of our question. This will also help the participant provide a lengthier response. This is the side the information, instead of coming from the book, comes from a few files. They're going to be posted on Canvas, so feel free to look those up or check them out. The files in general focus on writing open-ended questions. When writing an open-ended question, you're essentially leaving room for response, like it's open for response. When writing an open question, you should first avoid anything that's overly complex or lengthy, which seems weird, like you'd think a lengthy question would elicit a lengthy response. If your question's too long, you're dominating the conversation and you can risk confusing the participant. This is a question like, if you were on an airplane, you crash landed and got stranded on an island, what items would you bring? But the items you bring can't be for your survival, and they would have to be stuff that could fit within your luggage, so you brought them beforehand, and blah, 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 blah. You can see, like, you're starting to get bored with that question, and it's starting to get overwhelming. So stick to questions that are shorter and let the participants speak for themselves. The second thing you should pay attention to is checking for bias in a question, checking for assumptions, or begging the question. This really means that you don't know what the other person is going to say, so you can't prime your question for assuming that they're going to answer a certain way or assuming that they're starting at some point. Let the person speak for themselves. Next, and what is probably most important, is that your open questions should focus on stories, feelings, and thoughts. It's these three things that elicit details or responses of length. To help generate those three components, stories, feelings, or thoughts, you should start your question with how, why, what, tell me, or if. So questions like, how did that happen? How did it make you feel? Why did you do that? What happened? What was wrong? Tell me about what happened. Or you could use like a hypothetical situation. These are all types of questions that necessitate the data that we want. They're questions that force critical thinking to happen or more thought to happen. For your questions, let's take a moment to think about. For a question that starts with why, do you think that question would elicit a story, a feeling, or a thought? Or if the question started with how, would your question that starts with how, like how did that happen, elicit a story, a feeling, or a thought? This is just something to keep in mind because you want to balance your interview. You don't want just stories. You also want to include some feelings and thoughts, so you'll need a variety of questions. Next, I want us to practice. So what I have on this one side is questions that are not so good. They're very limiting and closed in a way. So what we need to do is use the 3 C's and use what we learned on the previous slide about stories, feelings, or thoughts to rewrite these questions. So let's start with the first one. Do you remember what happened the night of the incident? You could just say, yes, I remember. And that doesn't get you data. So we need to definitely rewrite it to elicit something. So the first thing I ask is, in this question, what kind of data do I want? Do I want a story, a feeling, or a thought? So for do you remember what happened? It sounds to me like I want a story. I want to know about the details of the event. So then I look back at that list and I think, okay, what language works best for that goal? Was it how, why, what, tell me that elicit stories? So for me, I identified how or what, or tell me, describe. I think those elicit more response for stories. So therefore I came up with, tell me about what happened the night of the accident. And that tell me gets me better data. Let's try again with the next one. Were you afraid for your life? That's another bad question. It's really similar to the question that Haley talked about in her video, in that it puts the words in the other person's mouth. They just go, yes, I was afraid. They pick up on that one word. So we need to remove that assumption definitely from that question and structure it in a way that it talks about more details. So let's do the follow through again. First, what data do I want to elicit? A story, a feeling, or a thought? What do I want to elicit? You think about that. And then what language works best for that goal? What word would elicit what I want? So what I came up with was, how did you feel? Why did you feel like that? So what do you think was my goal? And how do you know? What language gave it away? So those were 2 practice problems we did together, but please complete the rest on your own and feel free to email me what you come up with. I'm happy to give you feedback. This writing of questions is a really important skill for the rest of the semester because you will be doing another interview. Very likely you're going to be doing another interview. So we need to perfect this skill. I also wanted to mention quickly the idea of follow-ups. So your interview shouldn't be like a drill or interrogation. It shouldn't just be like question, answer, and then not even react to that and just go back to the next question. You want it to feel like a conversation. So you should incorporate a follow-up. A follow-up is after you hear that response, you react and ask a question to get more details. If you want to practice follow-ups, What I would encourage you to do is watch a video like the ones I have on the slide. They're from Glamour, and it's just like 70 people answer a certain question. And the questions tend to be pretty good open-ended questions. So pick one of those videos and watch it, and as you hear responses, try and come up with a follow-up. So whatever that child says, or the woman says, or the man says, react to it, and then what could you ask to get more details about that question? So again, the 3 C's and this information about the language of a question is very important and will be used throughout the semester. It is also important because it's very relevant to Quiz 2 and Project 1. Quiz 2 is actually going to be due early because you need to take what you learned in this interview to write one question, and it has to be a really good question. So make sure you practice so you can come up with a question that you're really proud of.